unhappy.
There's an article in today's Daily News by Charles, in the middle of the page, and it talks about the election, and it says, no matter if it was Bibi or the other guy, and he named all the people who are running, neither one will there be a two-state, will there be a two-Palestinian state. He says, not right now, maybe in the future, but not now.
Did you read, also this morning, I didn't read it yet, but my husband and Thomas Friedman's editorial in the Times.
I didn't get to that.
Another anti-Semite.
Well, he likes, Thomas Friedman likes Israel, but and he's not an anti-Semite, but he's very, he sees a big, he does see a big picture. And I listen, in the end, my opinion is whomever is the Prime Minister of Israel would care and preserve, protect Israel's security. And nobody is going to give away the shop. Everyone wants there to be a state of Israel. So, I just don't know. I felt like what I felt like Netanyahu did last week when he made that comment, no Palestinian state on my watch. And then backtracked on it the day after
He
he
only
won.
left because they don't recognize us. I heard the radio this morning, Geraldo was talking, and he was saying that because there isn't a two-state solution, eventually the Israelis are going to expand and expand, and it'll be a pity on the Palestinians. I thought it was an awful remark to make.
Oh, Geraldo
said that.
But you know what? Those people are citizens of the state of Israel.
That's why it was bad.
Honestly, that is honestly like saying, well, anybody who's Jewish in America, they're making a coalition, we gotta beat them down. I thought that was horrible. I really did. And from last week, I have admiration for Benjamin Netanyahu. But I thought his behavior this week was horrible. That's just my opinion. And what will be, but
Thank you.
and I just hope and pray that Israel is secure and healthy. There's a report going on about how the United States has been funding an organization called the New Israel Fund, which is extremely to the left, and that actually millions of dollars have been given to the New Israel Fund. So that's also not fair, and that's also meddling. So I don't know. It makes me want to just like.
It's interesting how.
I just want to know, how do you negotiate with people that are sworn to your destruction?
Well, that's another side of it. That's the other side of it.
Well, that's why he said that he did not want a two-state solution unless they recognize it.
And they
I
said
know.
they never recognized
They
it.
said they'll never recognize Israel. So on both sides, there's horrible racism, frankly, I think. And I love Israel. I do. I'm the least critical person of Israel, truthfully, but I thought that what happened this week was terrible in all fronts. And before that, I've been, I just don't even know. I hope that, God willing, they'll have the wisdom to continue to govern in a smart way that is, good for the future.
But see, I think that the racism in me is if he's saying that the Arabs are coming in droves and we want to do everything against the Arabs, but Likud also has Arab supporters. It isn't.
Right.
It's the Arabs who want to vote for the other side.
Right.
I'm not saying it because they're Arabs and we don't like Arabs, and that would be racist.
But that's the
But
way
he
it came
meant-
out, though.
Yes, it does.
That's the way it came out.
It did come up, but if you just gave him, he did explain it, but it
She's
was.
right.
And was it
Right.
definitely as the previous.
Listen,
speaker
there's
spoke.
certainly good reason for Israelis and for Jews to mistrust and fear Arabs. There's no, there's certainly good reason for it. But, we just have to keep trying to make the world a better place. I don't know what else to say about it. I know, I don't disagree with you. We gave away, And I've said it in this class before, I think it's very painful that the Arabs do not, Palestinians won't listen or recognize a Jewish narrative at all. I think that's, means there's no partners for peace. It's a rock and a hard place. But I did think that the way it came out when he talked about Arabs did sound racist. And as a person who's on the campuses, always fighting people who are accusing Israel and Jews of being racist apartheid, it was like fuel in the fire.
Sure.
So I don't know. I really don't, like I said, I just pray that the world will be a better place sooner than later, that's all. And for the safety and security of Israel and for all people, we want everybody to live in dignity, So, and talking about age of chutzpah, good introduction to today's lecture. Because today we're going to talk about some really chutzpahdik people, and that is that those are women rabbis in America.
Yes.
Okay. So, who knows when the very first woman rabbi was ordained, at least in modern times that we know of?
I think it was the early 70s, like 1972,
Well, close. Actually, the very first, and I'm holding my notes because I have dates, and you know me with dates, or I'm not good with dates. The very first woman to actually be ordained as a rabbi who completed a course of study, curriculum of study in a yeshiva in modern times, or what we would consider modern times, was a woman named Regina Jonas in 1935 in Berlin, Germany.
Wow.
She was ordained by the Reform movement, the very first woman to ever be ordained by a modern, contemporary Jewish movement. However, she never practiced as a rabbi. She was a principal of a school, of a yeshiva, and unfortunately she was killed by the Nazis in 1944 and never really got to realize. So then after that, we have a few precursors to women in the rabbinate. One was a woman out west named Ray Frank, who was out in Spokane, Washington. She was a traveling Hebrew school teacher. She went around and she taught, Hebrew school in the late 1800s. And when she was in Spokane, there was no one to lead high holiday services. So they asked her, and she led high holiday services, and she stuck around Spokane. And even though she was never ordained as a rabbi, she served as the spiritual leader of the small Jewish community in Spokane, Washington, and of those little western towns that were all around out west. Then, long time goes by. We don't have any other women practicing, or standing in as rabbis until the 1970s. And that was the first woman rabbi ordained in America was a woman named Sally Priest-Sand. And she actually, just recently, she was ordained in 1977.
Where?
From the Hebrew Union College, so also Reformed Jewish Institute of Religion. She was Reformed, and until 2009, she served as the rabbi of a congregation right in Monmouth, in New Jersey, Tinton Falls, and she was the pioneer. After that,
These are all reformed.
well, the woman in Germany was the classical German Reform movement, which the Reform movement began in Germany. The woman out west was just Jewish. She was a Hebrew school teacher. There was nobody, out in the Wild West in the 1800s. There was nobody else out there. There was a small group of people, and they needed a rabbi. She knew the most. But Sally was the first woman admitted to the Reform Seminary and went through it takes, first of all, to be really ordained, it takes 5 years of studying. It's like getting, it's getting a higher degree. It's 5 years of studying. One of those years is typically spent in Jerusalem. You have to, the curriculum is very rigorous. You have to be an expert in Bible, Torah, in the Talmud, rabbinic writings. Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, modern Hebrew, Midrash text, as well as pastoral, they take courses in pastoral counseling and synagogue management and all kinds of things. It's a 5-year, very intensive program with a
What's her
thesis.
full name? Sally?
Prisand.
S what?
S-A-N-D. Right. So, Prisand. So it's a very rigorous curriculum. And women from the late 1800s, early 1900s, women in America, especially, the suffragette movement is going on, women wanted to be rabbis. And in fact, a very famous woman that we all have heard of, Henrietta Zold, really wanted to be a rabbi, and she went to the Jewish Theological Seminary, which is a conservative seminary on the Upper West Side. She asked to be admitted into the rabbinical school. They admitted her, but only after she agreed that she would not seek ordination at the end of her education. So she studied as a rabbi would. Henrietta Zold finished 5 years of rabbinical school, but had agreed that she would not seek ordination at the end of it, but she wanted to learn and wanted to be a rabbi. And in those early days, when the women's movement was growing, a little sprout, women were starting to assert themselves here in this country, like I said, with the vote and things like that. All along, there have been women who wanted to be rabbis. So, for the most part, the traditional movements in our contemporary times, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, in the beginning, kept this at bay. The Reform movement, though, because they knew they had ordained Rabbi Jonas in Berlin, ideologically, they felt there could be women rabbis, and periodically they discussed it and argued it. And in 1922, they held an entire conference on it, where they had said, they had set committees to study what would be all the ramifications of women being rabbis. And it was determined by that committee that there's really no halakhic, which means according to Jewish law, reason why a woman can't be a rabbi. However, there's tradition that is very strong, and that, they were concerned that too many people would be very, already the Reform movement was thought of, was already the rebel movement, and they didn't want to further or cause any further alienation between other branches of Judaism. And in the end, they decided that what would happen if a woman rabbi wanted to have children, this was 1922, that she would not be able to perform her rabbinical duties and have children, and they were worried about what other Jews would think, and that it wouldn't go over well in their congregations, and in the end they decided not to. So more time goes on, but all along there's still women who are kind of interested and bucking the trend a little bit. One woman applied to Yeshiva University's rabbinical school in the 1950s, early 1950s, and she was never even responded to. They never even responded to her application, wrote to her or called her, and then she found out that subsequently later, some of the students had actually made fun of her application in a Purim play. So it was a struggle, but there was always a group of women who wanted to be rabbis. So in the 1950s, there was another woman, Mrs. I want to say it was Ackerman, but that's not quite right. Yes, I was right, Paula Ackerman, out in Indianapolis. She was the Rebbitzin of the congregation, of a Reform congregation, and her husband passed away. And when her husband passed away, the congregation asked her to fill in. So she wasn't a rabbi, she wasn't ordained, but she was very educated and very knowledgeable, and the congregation knew her and loved her. And she came in and served as the function as the rabbi in that congregation for it ended up being for about 10 years until she retired. So it's been a phenomenon, and then with the advent of really the women's movement and Betty Friedan in the 60s, Sally Persan made the push, was accepted into Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, the Reform Movement Seminary, and and was ordained as a rabbi and got a congregation and worked all her life as a congregational rabbi until I said she retired just recently in 2009. Now, she opted to not marry or have a family because she felt she was so devoted to her rabbinical duties. After that, the next woman to be ordained was a woman named Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, who was ordained by the Reconstructionist movement. Now, the Reconstructionist movement is a branch of Judaism. It's a small but vibrant branch of Judaism that was started by Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, who was a rabbi at the Jewish Theological Seminary, so a conservative rabbi. He's one of considered one of the great philosophers of modern time, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan. His ideas about theology are they're radical in some ways, but also very moving in others. I encourage you to look him up, Mordechai Kaplan. But the Reconstructionist Seminary from the very get-go allowed women. They split off from the conservative movement in 1967, and from the very beginning, they admitted women and allowed women, and Sandy Eisenberg Sasso was the first Reconstructionist woman rabbi, and she got a post where she was an assistant rabbi of a congregation that both affiliated with the Reconstructionist movement and the conservative movement. That is correct. That's kind of the basic theology. Mordechai Kaplan's theology was that God resides within all living things and that we're all connected to God through, this spark of the holy and the divine that's within us. Aside from that, a Reconstructionist synagogue will use more Hebrew than a Reform congregation did. Reform congregations, honestly, all of those three movements have kind of, polarized in towards each other, become closer in practice to each other than they were originally. A Reconstructionist congregation will use music on Shabbat, but not organ music, like a Reform congregation might have organ music. A Reconstructionist congregation will use tambourines, be a little bit hippie, a little renewal. It started in 1967, so a little more free-thinking, maybe, Reconstructionism is. Reconstructionism, just like all Judaism, believes in one God, but it's a different way of thinking about God, perhaps. That God kind of flows through all living things.
Plants and animals too.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the difference between pantheism and polytheism?
Well, polytheism is multiple gods. So polytheism attributes to one deity different personas. So like in Hinduism, actually Hinduism is polytheistic because there's one God in Hinduism, and I believe that's Rama. I don't really know very much about Hinduism, but I do know this, that when we see the different Hindu gods like Shiva with all her arms and things like that, Hindus believe that those deities are manifestations of attributes of the one God. So that's kind of poly. You understand what I'm saying? Does everybody get that? So there's one, in polytheism, there's one deity with many different attributes, aspects, that manifest in different forms. Okay,
Right.
but it's still the one deity with different aspects that come out in different forms.
So you could believe in one aspect only, or do you have to believe
No,
in
that
all-
people, usually the Hindus believe in all the aspects, and all the aspects together make up the one deity.
So that's not really polytheism, that's believing in one God, just like the.
Well, there are Hindus who say that who believe their religion is monotheistic. I mean, like I said, I don't know enough about it. I'm wading into waters that I'm not really knowledgeable in, but that is the way Hinduism is that There's one God, and the different gods are aspects of the one God. The pantheism means that you have Zeus and Athena and Hercules and, all of those other gods, Mars that you worship. Monotheism, there's just one deity. Animism, there's animal worship in there.
That's Chinese?
Chinese,
The year of the cat, the year of the dog.
but the Chinese religion is more a philosophy than a religion, and there's not so much a deity as there is a spirit. And listen, I'm calling back on days of comparative religion college. So you want to know more about it? Read up. Tell me next time.
What is the difference between Sunni and Shiite?
That comes from descendants of Muhammad, and there are people who follow, and I might be getting this wrong too, the Sunnis follow one branch of Muhammad's family, and the Shiites follow another branch of Muhammad's family, from what I understand.
One
There
is
was
a
a
poorer
split.
class and one is supposed to be the rich.
I don't know.
And they're
There was a
fighting for
split, an
thousands of years.
ideological split within the Muhammad's family, and some people followed one side, other people followed the other.
And they're fighting for thousands of years.
Fighting for thousands of years, sibling rivalry.
One second. So then it's fair to say that most of us believe in Allah, right?
Well,
Right?
Allah is just a name of God.
Right,
You
but
know,
we,
when you
they
say
believe in
Allah,
the same God we believe in, right?
They,
Right, so
yeah.
it's fair to say that everyone here probably believes in
Well, you
Allah.
know what, actually, Jews in
Right.
Arab lands,
Thank God.
Jews in Arab lands, the same way that we in English say God, Jews in Arab lands say Allah, and that's the Arabic word for God. That's all it is. So let's get back to women rabbis.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So in 1977, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and it's important to note that the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I'm not just saying it's because it's my alma mater, but because the Jewish Theological Seminary was founded by rabbis who came from Europe who wanted to start an American brand of Judaism that would fit in an appeal to people living here, away from the old country. And so the conservative movement and many of its ideologies were more rooted in an orthodoxy, whereas the Reform movement was rooted in a Lutheran type change in creating change in Judaism. Okay, so the Reform movement started in Germany in the 1800s as a product of the Enlightenment, and it was an attempt to modernize Judaism, much like Protestant Christianity modernized Christianity. It was considered the more modern way to practice religion and the more contemporary. So the Reform movement started as an effort to appeal to enlightened Jews, that is, Jews who had entered the secular world due to the opening of society and culture through the Enlightenment. The conservative movement started here as a response to the needs of American immigrant Jews who were coming over from Europe and who found themselves in a polyglot society whereas before they had largely been segregated, and were having to do things like work 7 days a week in the sweatshop. How do you keep the Sabbath when you have to work 7 days a week? And how do you keep the holidays and things like that in this new world and make it meaningful? So
Wasn't the conservative movement more to the right at the beginning, like they had sense of receiving?
Yes, in the very beginning, that's what I mean, the conservative movement was rooted in orthodoxy, was closer to orthodoxy than to the Reform movement.
Well, it depends on the temple. Some temples,
Originally,
the conservative is almost like the Orthodox,
Yeah.
except the women don't sit together, and others, it's more the other.
Right, but that's
I said
today. In the
originally.
very beginning, it was, like I said, it was an attempt to have people be able to engage with religion and religious practice in a way that was meaningful and contemporary to life in the United States. Okay, and since then, all of the movements, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox and Reconstructionism, all evolve to suit the needs of their congregants and their people who feel comfortable praying in that way. All of them continue to evolve. That's what keeps Judaism alive. That's why there's Jews still here 5,000 years after Abraham. So all of the movements, all of them, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, all the movements strive to maintain relevancy, to be relevant to their congregations and to appeal to people and for people to find meaning. And we all find our own place where we're comfortable. If you're a person who wants to go to a synagogue, you find the one where you're comfortable, where it works for you. And like I said before, in my mind, that is what has kept Judaism vibrant and alive for all these thousands of years, is that it's adaptable to its times and situations, times and place. So the conservative movement was about that, and in 1977, women kept on trying to apply to JTS to be rabbis, and they kept saying, you can take the rabbinical curriculum like they did with Henrietta Zoll, but you can't become ordained. And then those women would become teachers, principals, in Jewish education. 1977, the people were still pushing. It was already late. There was already Reform women were being ordained, Reconstructionist women were being ordained, and conservative women were not far behind. They wanted to be ordained. There was convened a commission at the Jewish Theological Seminary where they talked and they voted and looked at all of the halakha. The halakha is the Jewish law, and they could not find there's no halachic injunction against women being rabbis. Nowhere in Jewish law does it say a woman cannot be a rabbi. And even Orthodox rabbis will say that is the case. There's nowhere in halakha where it says women may not be a rabbi.
Well, in the Orthodox, we have courses where women become rabbis.
Right, and I'm going to get to that. But absolutely. My point is that in the Orthodox movement too, and I was going to get to that, there is nothing in Jewish law that prohibits a woman from being a rabbi. So the JTS convened this thing in 1977, and then they argued over it, and it ended up being shelved. So it wasn't until 1983 that the seminary faculty took a vote and decided to admit women and ordain women in the rabbinical school. And since then, there have been many women ordained through the Jewish Theological Seminary, through Hebrew Union College, and through the Reconstructionist Seminary. And so today, about 20% of all rabbis are women. If you take the Reform and Conservative and Reconstructionist movements, 25% of all rabbis in those three movements are women today. There is a tradition. It's not a halakha. It's a tradition that men should not hear a woman sing, a woman's voice, and some Orthodox sects will not listen to a woman singing, and that was one of the reasons. Although rabbis don't have to be the ones to sing or to lead prayers. A cantor does sing, does lead prayers, but traditionally the job of the rabbi is not necessarily standing at the pulpit and leading the prayers. And in fact, in many congregations all across the board, who leads the services? Congregants. Lay people. In my conservative congregation on a Saturday morning, somebody does the Shacharit service, somebody else does the Torah service, somebody else does the Musaf service. The rabbi gives the sermon, the Devar Torah, he leads some of the blessings, but in many congregations, it's congregants who actually lead the service.
The term for it is a shliach tzibur.
That's right. A shliach tzibur, which in Hebrew means the public speaker, the public emissary, the public one who's representing the public. So that brings us to orthodoxy. So now we have in the Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative movement, we have 25% of all rabbis in those movements are women. What's going on in the Orthodox movement? So that brings us to a woman whose name is Blue Greenberg. Anybody ever hear of Blue Greenberg? She's written a lot of books. She is a New Yorker, a modern Orthodox woman, and she started an organization in the 1980s called the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, or JOFA, J-O-F-A. And she is a very well-educated person herself. She's married to a very prominent rabbi, Irving Greenberg. And here, I want to read to you what she says. One of her most famous quotes is, "Where there's a rabbinic will, there's a halachic way." So that means that if the rabbis want to do something, they will find a way in the Jewish law to do it, to make it happen. And that, again, it's funny to say it, but that, again, is the fluidity of Judaism, is what has kept Judaism alive.
A perfect example of that is back in the late 1930s. There was a famous Jewish ball player named Hank Greenberg who played for the Tigers, and they were in the World Series. And he went to a Detroit rabbi because they wanted to find a way so he could play on Rosh Hashanah. And they found the halacha. That's the perfect example.
But he didn't play on your But that's right. So, Blue has been, and she still is today, she's much older now, but she dedicated her life actually to the cause of feminism in the Orthodox movement, and to making sure that women have a voice in the Orthodox movement. So here's another quote. Here's another what she believed. She believed that you don't become a rabbi. Like I said before, not all rabbis lead, yes, they do know how to lead the prayers, but it's not only what they do. They're the leader, the spiritual leader of the congregation. They provide guidance, they perform weddings and funerals and b'nai mitzvah, and they have many functions within the community. Being a rabbi is different than being a priest. When you're a priest in the Catholic Church, and you're ordained in the Catholic Church as a priest, that allows you to give the sacrament of the communion, which is a religious, holy function that actually in Catholicism transforms the wine into the blood of Jesus and the wafer into the body of Christ. So as a priest, you're ordained, you have that ordination gives you that spiritual, I don't know what the word for it is, power, the spiritual power to give the communion. Rabbis are not like that. When a rabbi gives a blessing, it's the same as if I gave a blessing or if you gave a blessing. It's a Jewish person giving a blessing, making a blessing. Being a rabbi does not imbue a person with any special powers to sanctify anything more than any other Jewish person. So Blue's argument, that's one of her main arguments. Being a rabbi is not some magical thing that you become ordained and you become a magical person who now has the power to do things. That's not what being a rabbi is. She said that being ordained is a confirmation of an individual's mastery of texts, which we talked about before, familiarity with precedents, that's so that you can look at what precedents, and the ability to reason analogically and apply those precedents to contemporary questions. So that's a big quote, but basically what it means is being a rabbi means that you have the body of knowledge based on your study of Torah and rabbinic texts, the Talmud, Midrash, Jewish history, all your wealth of knowledge, Hebrew, that allows you to help your congregants find their way spiritually by applying logical answers to questions of today. In argument, answer to Blue Greenberg,
No, I just wanna know how the polygamists in Utah could get married 2 and 3 times, and for who presides over these.
They get arrested.
you know what, there's such a thing, okay, you could move in with someone in this world today, you could move in with your partner, live with your partner, not be married, right? Happens all the time, all right? Is there anybody telling you no? If you are a Mormon polygamist and you want to have more than one wife, so maybe you have one legal wife and then the others are recognized in the eyes of your church, of your religion. They're not, you know, so, but not by the state. And that has all other kinds of ramifications. I mean, it comes to Social Security and inheritance, you know, we could get into that, but there's nothing to stop you from living with 2, 3, 4, you know, husbands or wives. I wanted to make sure we put husbands in there too. It could go both ways. So in answer to Blue Greenberg, the dean of Yeshiva University said that women can't receive smicha. Smicha is rabbinical ordination. The argument is because smicha, which means being ordained, originated with Moses and is passed down through the generations only to men. That's been the Yeshiva University kind of line about it. Now that being said, there are rabbinical seminaries, both here in America, Orthodox rabbinical seminaries, and there's a couple in Israel who are educating women, Orthodox women, in rabbinical curriculum. And some of them, there are a handful of ordained women rabbis. There's one in New York who there's a new yeshiva up in Riverdale, and she's working up there. I wrote down her name. Her name is Sarah Hurwitz. And she works with Rabbi Ari Weiss, who's a very famous rabbi up in Riverdale. Oh, you're right, Avi, I didn't read my handwriting right. Okay, so within the Orthodox movement, there are women who feel a spiritual calling to be rabbis. They want to be rabbis, and they are functioning. Sometimes it's teaching and working and performing rabbinical duties only for other women. So there might be a women's congregation that's, you know, made up all women and they're reading Torah and everything together, no men present. All the Orthodox women who want to be rabbis are functioning in a way that's very respectful to traditional Orthodoxy. They don't really want to rock the boat, and together with Jaffa, they want to kind of create a space for women rabbis within the Orthodox movement that is respectful. And here is Blue's other quote. She wrote, "Orthodox women should be ordained because it would constitute a recognition of their intellectual and spiritual attainments, because it would encourage great Torah study, because it offers wider female models of religious life, because women's input into the interpretation of Jewish text has been absent for 2,000 years and is sorely needed." I like that one. "Because it will speed the process of reevaluating traditional definitions that support hierarchy, because some Jews might find it easier to bring halachic questions concerning family and sexuality to a woman rabbi, and because of the justice of it all." So she's a person who functions in the modern Orthodox movement, highly respected, both she and her husband, and you know, she maintains that there should be women rabbis in the Orthodox movement. So
In the Orthodox movement, are girls still not allowed to be bat mitzvah in front of the Torah?
I don't know if girls go on the bima and read Torah. I think most Orthodox congregations, they do not. But what I do know that they most often do is really study, read, and prepare a Torah
They can prepare and do it in a woman's
in a women's
minyan only.
minyan.
and have the men sit behind the meat supper, okay. But I did go this past December to bat mitzvah on Shabbat at Rabbi Weiss's shul, and they had the girl reading and doing everything. You know, it was
Yeah.
very different for us.
So it's different. I mean, listen, it's a departure from what has been traditional Judaism for many years. But these are modern times, and women are asserting themselves in different ways. I mean, I remember when the first time I saw a woman rabbi, to me it was strange. And here I am. You know I'm a feminist, but to see a woman in a tallis with a kippah, and the first time I saw it, it was strange. But I've gotten used to it, and I appreciate what Blue says, that for some people, you know, if you have an issue that you need to talk to your rabbi about a personal issue, sometimes it's easier, especially for a woman, to talk to another woman.
True.
You know?
Are there female moils?
I don't know. I'm sure there's doctors who know how to.
I went to a bris of one of our congregants in our shul, and there was a woman mile, but she was also I believe she was a physician also.
Yeah, a lot of moils today are also physicians who are trained how to do that. Listen, the world changes. Not too long ago, you never saw a woman physician. We were talking about doctors. You didn't see women doctors not too long ago. So, you know, our ideas of what the way things should be, where humans are infinitely adaptable and we're able to change. So I want to give you this handout. There are two women who made the list of Forward every year puts out a list of the top 50 female rabbis. Two women who were on it were very, a little different than being a woman rabbi, which nowadays is actually becoming commonplace for there to see women rabbis. One is a woman who's the rabbi of Central Synagogue, which is a very large Reform congregation in Midtown. Her name's Angela Buckdahl, and she's Korean. She is the first Asian American woman rabbi. You know, first Asian American rabbi. I don't know that there is an Asian male rabbi even. And the other, I just gave you the paper about her, is this Alyssa Stanton, who is the first black woman rabbi who serves a congregation in Greenville in North Carolina.
Are they Jewish?
Yeah, of course they're Jewish. Now, they're Reformed. They're Reformed. And Alyssa converted. She converted as a young woman. She found meaning in Judaism, and that spoke to her as her personal expression towards God. She grew up in a Pentecostal house, and she converted. So, but she's been Jewish for many, many years, and she's very Jewish. And Angela came from an interfaith family, and was raised Jewish. You got a question?
Yes, certain times of the month women are considered unclean.
Good
And
question.
I wonder if that has any impact on the decision, or if anything has been discussed about with allowing women
It
to be
is.
rabbis.
That's one of the issues that came up, was that, women there's tradition that when women are menstruating, you're not supposed to touch the Torah, you're not supposed to be around men. That is an issue. Honestly, I think it's less, not an issue in the Reform conservative Reconstructionist movements. I think in the Orthodox movement it is an issue, and I think that maybe during those times, the person just does not, stays away from anything that might be considered nida, or means not pure to do. Now, in the Orthodox movement, a lot of the women who become rabbis, they don't call themselves rabbi, they call themselves rabbah, or maharat, which means a leader of the community. What it comes down to, according to Blue Greenberg, is what your education is. If you studied and completed the curriculum in a satisfactory way to graduate and to have the understanding and the breadth of knowledge and the compassion that it takes to be a clergy person, then you should be able to be one regardless of your gender. So it's another one of those issues on the, feminist issues on the forefront. You may agree with me, you may disagree with me. I'm telling you how things are going in the world today when it comes to females in Judaism, both here and in Israel and in Europe. In all corners of the earth where there are Jews, there are women serving as spiritual leaders. So whether or not you call them rabbis, whether or not they're ordained, whether or not, if you're not comfortable, you don't have to engage with a woman like that. But a lot of people are. So, thoughts? Tie it up?
Well, I'm just thinking, what about the issue in Israel with the wall, with the women who want to pray before the wall? Can you go into that a little bit?
So that is actually an offshoot movement of the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, is very involved in that, the Women of the Wall. And what that is basically a movement of women who feel that it is a Jewish woman's right to go to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, to pray at the Western Wall with their voices, as and to read from the Torah on the women's side. They're not looking for there to be an egalitarian mixture, but to be able to read from the Torah on the women's side at the Western Wall, to be able to sing and to worship there in that way. And this is against the practice of the rabbi who has the wall as his. There's a rabbi in Jerusalem who is in charge of the wall. That's his congregation, for lack of a better word. And it's against their policies that women should sing or be out loud or read from the Torah at the wall. So every month, on the day of the new moon, it's called Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the Jewish month, which that night is considered a special holiday for women. And a lot of places will do Rosh Chodesh or women's events on that night. Women will get together and bake challah or learn together, things like that. So every month on Rosh Chodesh, this group of women, which is a mixture of all the denominations, Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform women in Israel who live in Israel, go to the wall and make a point of praying in the way that they want to at the wall on the women's side. And for a while, every month they were getting arrested.
Yeah,
Because it was against the rules of the Western Wall. So every month the police would come and literally haul them to jail. It's like me or you, us being hauled to jail because we took the Torah out of the Western Wall. But there are people who are offended by it, both men and women. There are Orthodox people who feel that is offensive behavior, it's disrespectful, and so it's a clash within Judaism.
I think I read somewhere that as a concession, they're letting them, they have to be all the way in the plaza in the back.
Well, there is a section now, I just was in Israel in January, so now there's been more archaeological unearthing of the wall to, if you're standing at the wall, for those of you who've been here, to the right side. And it's still a continuation of the wall. And they have made a space there for egalitarian worship and for women to worship, so that it's far enough away, and that's been a compromise. There are still some though who, and the other thing about the wall, by the way, is that it used to be pretty evenly divided, women's side, men's side. Over the years, since 1967, and the wall was Jerusalem was reunified, the women's side keeps getting smaller.
Yes, yes, very
And
small.
you know what, the last time I was there in January, honestly, you could not even, to get up to be able to touch the wall was like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
it
I know when I
definitely
was in
has.
Israel.
Well, the men's side is more because it's inside the tunnel.
No, the outside.
The outside, the pizza has literally physically, you look at pictures of the Kotel Plaza from 1995 to today,
Very small.
the women's side is significantly smaller. You can't get up to the wall. I mean, you have to push yourself. Yeah, I know. Yeah, all right.
I remember.
Okay, so it's 11 o'clock.
12 o'clock.
Oh, 12 o'clock.
We can start all over.
We can start all over. The first book is The Boston Girl by Anita Diamond. Yeah, because I